Here's the economic update for December 6, 2025. So the Fed on November 26 came out with the Beige Book. This goes through all the economic activity that's gone over, say, the last 3 months or so. So it's saying that the economic activity overall has little changed. 2 areas have declined and 1 has grown. So that's why they're saying it's not changed much. What they have seen is that overall consumer spending has declined. However, high-end retail has remained resilient. Cautious discretionary spending, partially due to the government shutdown. They're also seeing that there's reduced EV sales. Basically, there's the tax benefits that have been taken away from that. Agriculture and energy are largely stable. However, the prices are fairly low. There was increased demand for food assistance, and that's partially because of the U.S. shutdown. This impacted food stamps. Manufacturing activity increased somewhat over the last 3 months. There are some headwinds where there's tariffs and uncertainty. The big one here is the labor market. Employment has declined slightly. So we're up to 4.4%, and the latest we have is from September. Now, in October and November, there have been a lot of layoffs and some other things. We don't have that data. We're going to have to figure this out, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get that report. So hold on for the next 2 weeks or so. With the labor market, most companies are not actually laying people off. What they are doing, however, is they're implementing hiring freezes, replacement-only hiring, and attrition. So if people are trying to find a job, they're going to find it difficult to actually get into a position, especially if they're just starting out and they don't have a lot of experience. What we've seen is that manufacturing, construction, healthcare, they're finding that they're having higher wage gains, and this is partially due to a tighter labor supply with those skill sets. Our prices have also risen moderately, and this is due to tariffs, insurance, utilities, technology, and healthcare. So in terms of jobs, on December 3rd, the ADP released that we've lost 32,000 jobs in November. They stated that we lost approximately 120,000 jobs from small businesses, anything less than 50 employees per business, and gained about 90,000 in the medium to large business. On December 4th, the weekly initial unemployment claims, these are down. They have 191,000. So this is the lowest we've seen in 3 years. I've seen some people commenting and saying that it might be partially due to the holiday weekend, but I don't really buy that. But if I look back over those years, I don't see dips necessarily right at Thanksgiving. So I don't really believe that. I think it's just that we're not going through massive amounts of layoffs. It's just people aren't hiring. So if people don't hire, this number goes up. But if they're also not laying off, then you don't see a huge spike in unemployment claims. December 4th, we also got a report that about 71,000 jobs are to be cut in November. So we have a total cut of about 1.17 million jobs that have been cut to date. This is up about 54% year over year compared to last year. And that's from this report from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. So for inflation, December 5th, we have our personal consumption expenditures. This is our key measure of inflation that the Fed prefers, and we went up to 2.8%, and PCE core came down slightly to 2.8%. Now with PCE, the one thing I do want to note is they had over a $10 billion increase in gas, energy, also housing, utilities, as well as healthcare, and as well as insurance and financial services. These are not really discretionary. These are necessities. This is not necessarily what you want to spend money on. This is kind of what you have to spend money on. So that's not necessarily a good sign that these are going up. However, automobile sales and things like that, and durable goods, those went down this month. November 25th, we got our Producers Price Index of 2.7% and PPI core, which is, when you see core, it just means subtracting out food, energy, that sort of thing. And that's 2.9%. These last two are from September. Because of the shutdown, we haven't gotten any additional data. October 24th, we got our Consumer Price Index of 3% and our Consumer Price Index core, which is down slightly at 3% as well. And the reason why this was released during the shutdown, effectively you need July, August, and September numbers to figure out the cost of living adjustment for Social Security. The Fed does have a dual mandate. They want to have stable prices. They have a 2% target for inflation for that PCE number, and they want to retain maximum employment. So what we're having right now are prices are going up at a faster rate than the target, but at the same time, our employment, we're starting to see unemployment go up as well. So the Fed has to make a decision, and what they're deciding at the moment is, if you've noticed, they've been reducing the Fed interest rate over the last couple of meetings at the FOMC, and I believe on December 10th, my prediction is we'll have about a 0.25% interest rate cut. There's about a 90% chance of that. So how's the consumer doing? So on November 25th, we got retail sales. They show that they're up 0.2%, but look at this, plus or minus 0.4% uncertainty. So this number could have actually gone down. So that's why it's red and green, and that's month over month. However, year over year, we're plus 4.3%, plus or minus 0.5%. And if you look at this, we're looking at about 3% inflation. So you take away inflation, you're about 1.3% year over year increase in sales. November 25th, we also got consumer confidence. This fell sharply in November. For the expectations, that index dropped another 8.6 points. So now we're at 63.2. Do note that anything below 80 is a signal for a recession that's ahead. Do note that this has been in this territory for the last 10 months. Some people have a hypothesis that we've had a rolling recession that started in 2022 and it's continued through April of 2025. But who knows if we're in a labor recession? We're not in a technical recession. In 2022, first quarter, we had a negative quarter of GDP. First quarter of 2025, we've also had negative GDP. We haven't had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, however, which is generally used as a guide for a technical recession. Families in current and expected financial situation, they're thinking that it's worse than the prior months. So that's not necessarily good because that's going to impact how the consumer spends. Consumer spending in the United States accounts for about 2/3 of our entire economy. So if people get afraid and they stop spending, effectively the economy goes down and results in negative GDP, recessions, job losses, things like that. In manufacturing, the ISM report came out on December 1st, shows that we have growing production in 4 areas: computer electronics, food, beverage, tobacco, miscellaneous, and machinery. However, there's a decline of 11 other areas of manufacturing. It's showing that prices have increased and are increasing faster. The economy is still growing, however, it's slowing down. Manufacturing is contracting faster than it previously was. Another interesting note for manufacturing, the US and the UK reached a trade deal. Effectively, any pharmaceutical products coming out of the UK will have a 0 tariff impact on those. And then the UK, in response, has agreed to have a 25% increase in what the National Health Service will be willing to pay as a maximum for drugs. So that allows for some drugs from the US that were previously too expensive to now be sold in the UK to the NHS. I do work in pharma, so do realize that anything I say here, it has no reflection of anything my employer has. It's only just personal opinions or what I've found independent of that. For GDP, first quarter 2025, it was minus 0.6. Second quarter, we rebounded at positive 3.8%. Third quarter 2025, this estimate has come down slightly. We're now at 3.5%. This is on the nowcast estimate, and it's going to take several months of revisions before we actually know what that number is. So in line with some of what we've seen in the Beige Book, you'll see some articles around we have a K-shaped economy at the moment. Right now, the top 10% of earners are spending approximately 50% of all spending in the economy, and the remaining 90% of people are spending about 50%. So the top 10% are doing fairly well. The bottom 90% are having some hard times with the increase in inflation and keeping up with that. What you'll notice is that if people think that they have to have more value for when they're buying something, or they don't have as much money when they're purchasing something, they might start to go to Walmart, Dollar Tree, and Dollar General. So if you look at this year, Walmart's up 27%, Dollar Tree's up 60%, Dollar General's up 75%. That's growing faster than the S&P 500, even with the Magnificent Seven averaged in there. So just something to think about. So with all of this information, what am I doing? Well, first off, make sure that I have an emergency fund, I get out of debt, that sort of thing. So I have more than a 6-month emergency fund. It's getting closer to about a year. And I keep that money more in FDIC, CDs, high yield savings accounts. So I'm still earning, 3.5%, 4% or more interest. So I keep up with inflation because I don't want that value to go away. So anything less than about 3%. Inflation's eating away the value of the money. Number two, if the money is needed in the next 5 years, say I need to buy a car for my wife, which I'm planning on, and her car is going to die at some point. So I need to plan ahead for that. So I'm going to keep that money again in FDIC, like CDs, high yield savings. That way I have access to it and I wouldn't be pulling it out while, say there's a stock market crash or something like that. I don't want to pull money out at that point in time. That's when I want to put more money into the stock market. The big one for me is you want to take emotion out, especially when you're investing. So anything that I don't need for at least 5 years, say it's retirement or it's some other thing I don't need for a while, I'm going to use dollar cost averaging. So every time I get money, I put a certain portion of that away. And with that, I'm going to invest primarily in the S&P 500, about 70-80%, and about 10 to 20% in the total international stock market, and anywhere from 0 to 10% bonds. Now, bonds have an inverse relationship with interest rates. So as interest rates drop, bond values go up, but bond yield goes down, if that makes sense. So by having about 10% bonds now, if the interest rate or the bond yields go down over time while I hold the bond, I can then sell that bond and the value has gone up. So I have another video on value of bonds and how that works. But that's some of the background for that. And then people also ask questions of, do you have any precious metals? So this is from a special request. Everybody wanted to see the suit of armor. So instead of a regular suit of armor. Anyway, I hold well over 150,000, probably now well over 200,000 because of the prices going up so much. But basically you can have gold coins, gold jewelry, gold bullion, that sort of thing. So in terms of silver, basically you can pick up silver rounds, silver dollars, you can pick up silver bars. They also have, if you have some old like Morgan dollars, if you look on the side, it's all silver, so it's all the same color. And you can also have coins from pre-1964, basically quarters, half dollars, dimes. The other thing I used to make a lot of body armor, so I have several suits of armor, and this suit is made out of copper, so it's about 75 pounds of copper suit of male armor. It's pretty cool because it actually adjusts no matter which way you move, and it has pretty good coverage. I also have maybe a couple 100 pounds of what I call aluminum ingots. So I take scrap aluminum, I melt it down, and then I have ingots to make other things. I do 3D printing, sand casting, and can make pretty much whatever I want from the metals. I also have brass, lead, that sort of thing. I do have the SPY put option. Again, this is not really investing, this is more of insurance. So if the S&P 500 goes down, this gives me coverage and protects me from the downside risk. And then I also have TLT, which are bonds. Effectively, that's a call option. So if interest rates continue to drop and bonds have an inverse relationship with interest rate and yield, so if I have that bond or I have that option and all of a sudden the yield goes down, the bond value goes up. So that's why I have that. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm expecting sometime before 2027. And of course, I still have the house, land, and a farm. Those are things that are not as easily to buy and sell, and you need to live somewhere anyway, and growing crops takes some time. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about how to make more money, how to save, how to invest, and how to start businesses, this is a channel for you. And once in a while, you'll get a glimpse into some very odd hobbies that I have, such as making suits of body armor or smelting metal and 3D printing and sand casting and all that other things, and how those could be turned into businesses as well. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and have a great day.